Imagine dawn breaking over a nice Cuban village as a rattling electric train pulls into Hershey Station. Its green and cream rail car sparks on the aging wires. The station sign still reads Hershey, a relic of a different era, and the locals, well, they all pronounce it Hershey, just as they have for over a century. Around the platform, clapboard houses with sagging porches stand in rows, their once bright paint now peeling under encroaching vines. In the distance, the hulking ruins of a sugar mill loom, rusted machinery spilling from gutted buildings. Older residents gather by the tracks, trading memories of when this was a model company town, all built by the famed American chocolatier Milton S. Hershey. Back then, the lawns were manicured, the smell of molasses hung sweet in the air, and a Hershey-sponsored baseball team played in a pristine stadium. But now the mill lies silent, and the town, officially renamed Camilo Cienfuegos decades ago, feels frozen in time, suspended between fading glory and an uncertain future. So how did an American candy empire leave its mark on Cuba, and what became of the town that it built? Let's find out. Just before we continue, quick word from today's fantastic sponsor, Holzkern. Quick question, when's the last time you bought a gift that didn't feel kind of generic? Well, Holzkern makes watches and jewelry out of actual natural materials, wood, stone, even things like amethyst and peacock feathers. It sounds niche because it is. I've got one of these on right now, and it's got this beautiful blue leaf background, which just looks really nice on this black metal bracelet. It's just a really great looking watch. These are small batch, they're sustainably made, and they really last. And during Black Week, you can grab anything from their site for up to 30% off, but that's only until December the 1st. So, if you're even half considering a holiday gift that isn't just another gift card or a bottle of wine, this is your moment. Grab one of these. They're handcrafted in Europe, and if you're in the United States, Holzkern handles customs fees, and shipping takes between 5 and 9 days. No surprise charges, no drama, nothing like that. So just hit the link in the description or the pinned comment below, and you'll save up to 30% off exclusively during Black Week. This doesn't run forever, so click now, grab something with a little more meaning. That's holzkern.com/places. So in 1916, World War I is raging and sugar is in desperately short supply. Milton S. Hershey, the chocolate magnate from Pennsylvania, arrives in Cuba and immediately falls in love with the island. Within weeks, he's made a decision that's going to change everything. He needs sugar. He needs a lot of sugar. I mean, his chocolate empire back home just can't function without a steady supply, and, well, wartime shortages are strangling production. So Hershey does what Hershey does. He buys a sugar mill, a modest one near Santa Cruz del Norte, and then he buys the land around it. Local experts think he's a bit crazy. The site is really remote. There's barely any infrastructure. There's no proper roads for supply. There's no labor nearby. But Hershey pushes ahead anyway. By 1918, he's not just upgrading the old mill, he's building a state-of-the-art sugar refinery. And next to it, he's laying the groundwork for something unprecedented, an entire company town. You see, this won't just be another sugar operation. No. Hershey envisions a model community for his workers, reflecting his ideals of welfare capitalism. Happy workers are productive workers after all. He even starts constructing an electric railroad to link his venture to the ports in Havana and Mantas. The Cuban countryside, scarred by recent wars and decades of foreign exploitation, is about to host an unlikely experiment in American utopia. Now, this town was entirely built from scratch, and he names it Hershey because, of course, he does. By the early 1920s, Central Hershey, that's what they call the mill, is surrounded by a planned village of neat streets and workers' homes. Doing about 160 to 180 houses here, counts vary, and they're all laid out in this very American-style grid. Each house has a yard, of course it does, a front porch, of course it does, because it's designed to look like small-town USA, just dropped in the middle of the Cuban countryside. But Hershey imports more than architecture. He brings the amenities of modern life, a public school built and furnished entirely at his own expense, a medical clinic, a company store, an ice plant, a clean water system. By October 1922, his masterpiece is complete, the Hershey Electric Railway. 57 miles of electric train connecting the mill to Havana and Matanzas ports, Cuba's first electric interurban railway. In this tropical paradise, workers and their families enjoy facilities that are pretty unheard of in rural Cuba at the time. There's a movie theater showing the latest Hollywood films, there's a golf course, social clubs, there's even that baseball stadium. The company town shines as a beacon of prosperity and paternalistic care. It's designed to attract workers to it and keep them there. Cuban observers, they marvel at this little piece of the USA on their soil. The orderly parks, the American-style comfort. Hershey's town becomes basically the envy of the surrounding towns, places that lack electricity and running water, basic amenities that Hershey's workers now take for granted. Now, Hershey's Cuban venture rises amid a volatile sugar market. And volatile, bit of an understatement there. World War I and its aftermath create what the Cubans call the dance of the millions. Sugar prices soar to record highs by 1919 and 1920. Cuba's sugar crop is suddenly worth up to $1 billion. Milton Hershey rides this bonanza like a wave. He rapidly acquires more mills, Central Rosario in 1920, Central Carmen and San Antonio in 1925, and a bunch of others. By the mid-1920s, Hershey's Cuban empire is absolutely staggering. 60,000 acres, 5 sugar mills, a peanut oil plant, a henequen plantation, that's sisal fiber by the way, and 251 miles of rail lines. Cuban leaders love him. President Gerardo Machado awards Hershey the Grand Cross of the National Order of Carlos Manuel de Cepedes, Cuba's highest honor for bringing investment and stability to the island. But here's the thing about booms, they eventually bust. In 1921, oversupply causes sugar prices to crash dramatically. Many Cuban mills go bankrupt, and when the Great Depression hits at the decade's end, well, there's even more failures. But Hershey's operations, they managed to weather the storm. You see, Hershey's got deep pockets. He's independent, famously refusing to join sugar cartels, and he absorbs the losses and keeps on modernizing. By 1927, he reorganizes everything under the Hershey Corporation to manage his Cuban enterprises. Through boom and bust, Central Hershey remains one of Cuba's most efficient refineries, churning out high-quality sugar for Hershey bars, as well as Coca-Cola, by the way. The turbulence of the 1920s proves Milton Hershey's commitment to his Cuban experiment, but it also foreshadows something important, how global market forces can make even a tropical utopia rather vulnerable. Now, for workers and their families, everyday life in Hershey, Cuba during the 1920s through 40s, it feels almost like living in a Midwest US town, just with palm trees. Employees earn steady wages, they enjoy benefits that are rare in Cuba. There's affordable housing with indoor plumbing, free schooling for their children, healthcare access, lots of leisure activities. On weekends, families picnic in the beautifully landscaped Jardin de Hershey, Hershey's Gardens by the Santa Cruz River. The company store sells everything from tools to Hershey's Kisses, which are so abundant that expired candy gets thrown away, which wasn't exactly normal in Cuba at the time. Residents recall the social club and hotel serving ice cream on lace tablecloths with English china. There's a genuine pride in living in Hershey. As one resident put it, they lived like kings, but underneath this idyllic surface, there was a clear social hierarchy. American managers live in larger, stately homes, some with screened-in porches unheard of elsewhere in Cuba. Cuban and foreign workers of different races, they have unequal privileges. Under Hershey's regime, Afro-Cubans are segregated. They're barred from certain neighborhoods, certain jobs. Berta Campalegre, an Afro-Cuban resident, would later recall, "We weren't allowed to live in these houses, the ones you're referring to being for the white supervisors. They looked down on us Cubans," one local remembered of the American bosses. For white Cuban workers, Hershey's paternalism provides opportunity and comfort. For black Cubans and others, it comes with restrictions typical of the Jim Crow era, imported straight from the USA. Still, and this is important, many longtime residents grew fond of Mr. Hershey himself. Milton Hershey often wintered in Cuba. His hands-on generosity, funding orphanages after a tragic train accident killed workers' children, hosting fairs, giving bonuses. It earns him a reputation as a benevolent patriarch. The town embodies a bit of a paradox. It's both a genuine community with exceptional quality of life, and it's also a company-controlled enclave reflecting the racial and social norms of its time. This tension between prosperity and prejudice, it's about to meet something that's going to change everything. And you probably saw this one coming. Revolution. So after 3 decades in Cuba, Milton Hershey faced the end of an era. By the mid-40s, the 88-year-old tycoon has no children to inherit his business. He's long since put the wealth into a charitable trust, and sensing that the post-war world might bring uncertainty, Hershey's makes a prescient decision. It's time to leave Cuba. So, in 1946, Hershey's corporation sells everything, all the Cuban holdings, 5 mills, 60,000 acres, the railroad, the utilities, sold to the Cuban Atlantic Sugar Company for about $18 million. But Milton Hershey himself, he'd already died by that point in 1945 before seeing the full transfer. But it already ensured that his Cuban workers got a generous severance package. He also ensured that the town's amenities would be maintained at least initially. Now, the new owner is Julio Lobo, Cuba's richest sugar baron, a flamboyant Havana-based magnate known as the Last Sugar King. And under Lobo's profit-driven management, well, things rather expectedly started to change. Some of Hershey's paternal perks, they fade. Lobo cuts costs. He reportedly reduces jobs at the mill. And the subsidized town cafeteria with cheap meals, Lobo closes it. As one former resident recalled, when Lobo took over, he wanted to cut costs. And locals noticed the shift. El Central Hershey is still productive, even expanding output with new machinery from the US and Europe. But that unique sense of community pride begins to wane. By 1958, Cuba is in political upheaval. Revolution is on the horizon. The sale of Hershey's model town marks a turning point from American paternalistic control to conventional capitalist ownership. Of course, this was all before the storm of revolution breaks. 1959 rolls around, and the Cuban Revolution triumphs, and everything, absolutely everything changes in Hershey, Cuba. Fidel Castro's guerrillas overthrow the Batista regime on New Year's Day, and within months the new government moves to nationalize major industries, sugar mills of course included. In Hershey's model town, workers wake up to find the mill under state control. The American era by now is definitely over. The Cuban flag replaces corporate banners, and the very name Hershey is deemed a vestige of imperialism. In mid-1959, officials renamed the town to Central Camillo Cienfuegos, after one of Castro's revolutionary commanders who died tragically that year. Camillo Cienfuegos had no direct link to the town, but as a beloved revolutionary hero, his name symbolizes Cuba's new identity nicely. The Hershey Electric Railway gets folded into the state railway system, becoming the Camillo Cienfuegos line. Signs reading Central Hershey are taken down, painted over, except, this is a curious one, at the train station, where some Hershey signs remain for some reason. The revolutionaries implement sweeping changes. Private property, of course, is seized. Foreign owners like Lobo, they flee. Castro indeed reportedly offered Julio Lobo a role managing Cuba's sugar industry, but Lobo chose exile in the United States instead. The mill workers are now government employees, and to underline the new egalitarian ethos, the state lowers wages for some higher-paid workers, which narrows disparities. Hershey's old management privileges, well, they're all gone. The exclusive Hershey Country Club and golf course, symbols of American wealth, they're closed, they're demolished or repurposed. In the official narrative, the capitalist enclave has been liberated. No more Mr. Hershey in charge, no more segregated housing, no more private cafeterias. Locals are told they owe their improved social rights to the revolution. And in a propagandistic flourish, the new authorities reopen Hershey's old cafeteria under government management. They hang a big sign out front saying, "Gracias a la revolución," thanks to the revolution. Amparo de Jong, who witnessed these changes, would later say, "Everything has been destroyed." These dramatic changes, they mark the start of a new chapter, one in which Hershey, now Camillo Cienfuegos, must fit into Cuba's socialist experiment. In the 1960s, the villagers of Camillo Cienfuegos, they adjust to life under a socialist regime. The early revolutionary period brings tangible social gains for those who'd been marginalized. Segregation is abolished. Afro-Cuban families can now live in any neighborhood. Take Berta Campalegre, we mentioned earlier, a longtime black worker who'd been excluded from the American side of town. In 1967, she gives birth to triplets. And what happens? Well, she's promptly allocated one of those spacious former American managers' houses. All thanks to El Jefe, she says. And by El Jefe, she means Fidel Castro, of course, not Hershey. Stories like Berta's become local legends of equality achieved. The town's facilities are now run by the government, ostensibly for public benefit. Education and healthcare remain free and accessible, now under Cuba's national systems. The sugar mill continues operating as Central Camillo Cienfuegos, but it's not sending sugar to Hershey's chocolate factory anymore. No, it's going to state buyers, eventually supplying sugar to the Soviet Union in exchange for oil and aid. As one account put it, sugar that once sweetened Hershey bars now goes to sweeten Soviet tea. On the surface of all of this, the transition was smooth. Employment at the mill stays high, some workers join new revolutionary labor unions or militias, and they're proud to contribute to Cuba's transformation. But beneath all the optimism, there are some cracks. The paternal warmth of Hershey's era, it's replaced by bureaucratic control. Uniformity is enforced, wages are leveled, and many skilled workers just resent these pay cuts. And the unique identity of the town, it's all downplayed. But the name Hershey did refuse to die. Even as maps and officials called it Camino Cienfuegos, everyday folks continued to say El Central Hershey, out of habit, maybe out of quiet affection. Older residents passed down stories of the before time, sometimes with pride, sometimes with sarcasm, and here's the central irony of it all. Revolutionaries saw Hershey as a capitalist exploit to be corrected, but many villagers, they saw Hershey's town as a fond part of their heritage. One lifelong villager captured this perfectly. He described himself as a feudalista, entirely in favor of the revolution, yet in the same breath he lamented, slowly the town is deteriorating. Now, this human-scale tension between ideological narrative and lived experience, it would only grow in the decades that followed. So for all the political and economic upheaval, one constant remained in the town's life. The Hershey Electric Railway is a living piece of Milton Hershey's legacy that the revolution couldn't replace. By the 70s and 80s, this electric train line, now operated by the Cuban state, is still the only of its kind in Cuba. Everyday vintage railcars trundle along the 92-kilometer route between Havana and Matanzas, and Hershey Station, or Camino Cienfuegos Station, officially, sits roughly at the midpoint. How's it keep running? Well, resourceful Cuban engineers, they keep the system going with ingenuity and spare parts scrounged from all around the world. The ride becomes notoriously bumpy, slow, the aging cars swaying and screeching. Passengers get a 3-hour journey through fields of cane and coastal plains. But for many villagers, the train is a lifeline. It carries workers to nearby factories, students to school. It brings visitors out to the countryside. Over time, the Hershey train gains a bit of a mythic status. Tourists find their way onto it. They're charmed by the retro character, the open windows, the wooden seats. Sometimes there's even goats or chickens on board in true Cuban fashion. The train's continued operation subtly honors Hershey's impact. The stations still carry the old name in railway timetables. Foreigners seeking the Hershey train, well, they must use that name to buy a ticket. During the special period of the 1990s, after Soviet aid evaporated, fuel shortages began to cripple Cuba's transport. But the electric line, well, it keeps running, albeit sporadically. That's because, of course, it doesn't rely on diesel. The endurance makes the Hershey train a symbol. To residents, it's a treasured remnant of better times. To Cuban officials, it's a practical asset, and now a piece of industrial heritage. So, as the 20th century wanes, so does Cuba's sugar industry. And Hershey's town faces its greatest challenge yet. 1991, the Soviet Union collapses, and Cuba gets hit pretty damn hard. Suddenly, the generous subsidies and guaranteed sugar purchases that propped up unprofitable mills, they vanish. Global sugar prices are at rock-bottom lows. The Cuban government makes a painful decision. It just can't keep all the mills running. In 2002 or 2003, sources differ, Central Camino Cienfuegos, the former Central Hershey's, shut down. After 84 years of nearly continuous operation, the giant crushing machines, they grind to a halt. Workers gather for one last zafra, a sugar harvest, but soon the cane fields around Hershey are plowed under or just left to grow wild. The closure is devastating. Generations had worked at that mill. It was the reason the town existed at all. The government tries to soften the blow, but they retrain some of the 1,300 displaced workers for jobs in emerging sectors. A ceramic tile factory opens nearby, others are sent to tourist resorts on the coast. Some younger families relocate to Havana. But many residents, they just leave. They search for better opportunities elsewhere, accelerating a quiet exodus. As one account put it, many Hershey residents left for Havana, Miami, and beyond. By the mid-2000s, the town feels emptier, eerily quiet. The mammoth mill complex is left abandoned, a skeleton of metal beams and broken concrete, slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. Locals salvage what they can, stripping rebar and copper wiring to sell or reuse. In the empty mill yard, cows graze among the rusting sugar vats, among toppled smokestacks, among giant cogwheels forged in Ohio and Pennsylvania nearly a century ago. One observer notes somberly, the town's heart, its entire purpose for existing, was gone. Those who remain must adapt to a new reality. Production is replaced by preservation, holding on to memories and whatever livelihood can be found. Hershey's grand experiment, kept alive through war and revolution, well, it finally succumbed to economics. In the aftermath of the mill's closure, Hershey became a town of ghosts and memories. The population skews older, many young people have drifted away, and those that remain often just do so out of attachment to the place. Walk down any street and you'll likely meet someone who fondly recalls the old days. There's Amparo de Jong, 90-something, the first person ever born in the town back in the 1920s. She'll tell you how wonderful it was when Mr. Hershey was in charge, quoting her, "We had the best sugar in the world, and we lived like kings," eyes bright with nostalgia. She remembers the excitement when Hollywood movies arrived, the sweet smell from the refinery, the sense of community pride. Ask her about today, though, and her smile fades. Everything's been destroyed, she says, of the post-revolution neglect, gesturing at the crumbling buildings. It's horrible what they have done. And then there's Meraldo Noya Sutil, a true believer in Castro's revolution, who moved here in 1950. Now in his 80s, Meraldo stands in front of his weathered wooden house and admits something remarkable, which we heard him say earlier. "I'm a Fidelista, but the town is deteriorating." In his youth, he says, the sugar mill and village thrived even under socialism, but in recent decades, he's watched decay set in. Many residents openly compare past and present. It was better before, you hear in conversations. Not as reactionary politics, but just as a simple truth of experience. They note the overgrown gardens, the derelict golf course that was never replaced, the peeling paint on the once busy social club. Yet these reminiscences carry no venom. There's communal melancholy. Proud revolutionaries concede that something was lost. As one reporter noted, villagers do not hesitate to draw a contrast between the current state of the town and the way it looked when Mr. Hershey was the boss. Younger folks who never knew Hershey times, they listen to these stories and wonder, will they ever see their town flourish like that again? Despite everything, despite revolutionary decrees, passing decades, economic hardships, the name Hershey refuses to vanish from this little Cuban village in the countryside. It's most visible at the train station, those large metal letters spelling Hershey still adorning the old depot facade. Each day, commuters and schoolchildren wait under that sign for the train, perhaps not even noticing its significance anymore. Around town, people naturally call their home Hershey in conversation. Even officials revert to the old name informally. In recent years, even Cuban guidebooks and travel agencies have started to acknowledge reality. They list it as Camino Cienfuegos, and in brackets, Hershey, because that's what visitors will hear on the ground. Long after the chocolate baron and the revolutionary hero are both gone, the people choose the name that feels authentic to their story. Thank you for watching.